The ground turned to liquid in 15 seconds flat. 400,000 people stood on soil that suddenly behaved like water. Buildings tilted. Cars sank. Entire neighborhoods slid into the ocean. This wasn't science fiction. This was Anchorage, Alaska on March 27, 1964. The strongest earthquake in North American history just hit. But the shaking wasn't what killed people. It was what happened to the ground itself. Solid earth transformed into something else entirely. Something engineers had warned about for years. Something nobody believed could happen on this scale. Robert Atwood, editor of the Anchorage Daily Times, watched his office building ride the ground like a ship on ocean waves. The pavement outside moved in 6-foot swells. His reporter later wrote that downtown looked like a sea in storm. But that was only in the first minute. What happened next over the following 4 minutes and 33 seconds rewrote geology textbooks forever. Anchorage in 1964 had grown fast. Too fast, some said. The population hit 44,000 in the city proper. The greater area housed 400,000 residents. World War II turned this frontier town into a strategic military hub. Developers built homes and offices at breakneck speed. They built on something geologists called the bootlegger cove clay. This clay sat beneath most of downtown and the Tunnigan Heights neighborhood. The fancy homes. The new schools. The government buildings. All resting on this specific geological formation. Nobody talked much about what clay does during earthquakes. A few engineers raised concerns in technical reports. The reports gathered dust in municipal offices. Real estate was booming. Construction was everywhere. At 5:36 p.m. on Good Friday, the sun still hung in the sky. Families prepared dinner. Kids played outside in the lingering daylight. Robert B. Atwood sat in his newspaper office on 4th Avenue. His staff was wrapping up the day. Then the building lurched sideways. But here's what nobody knew in those first seconds. This wasn't going to be a normal earthquake. The Aleutian megathrust fault had just released energy equivalent to 250 million tons of TNT. That's 1,500 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. The quake registered 9.2 on the Richter scale. Still the second strongest earthquake ever recorded by instruments. And it was about to teach the world a terrifying lesson about soil mechanics. The shaking started gentle. Then it got violent. Most earthquakes last 15 to 30 seconds. This one lasted 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Long enough to seem like it would never stop. But the shaking wasn't the main killer. What happened to the bootlegger cove clay was the nightmare. This clay contained layers of sand and silt. Water sat trapped between the particles. When the earthquake hit, the shaking acted like a blender. The soil particles lost contact with each other. The water pressure between them spiked. And in 15 seconds, solid ground became liquid. Engineers call this soil liquefaction. Anchorage became the textbook case. Downtown Anchorage's 4th Avenue literally split in half. One side of the street dropped 11 feet straight down. Atwood's newspaper building rode this drop like an elevator. Cars parked on the street now sat at crazy angles. Some tipped backward. Some forward. The J.C. Penney store collapsed entirely. But 4th Avenue wasn't even the worst of it. 3 miles away, the Tunnigan Heights neighborhood was experiencing something far more catastrophic. 75 homes sat on a bluff overlooking the water. Beautiful views. Expensive properties. The bluff was pure bootlegger cove clay. Perry Mead stood in his living room when the shaking started. He was an engineer. He knew immediately this was bad. What he didn't know was that the ground beneath his neighborhood was already liquefying. The bluff was about to do something nobody thought possible. It was about to flow. Like a slow-motion avalanche of liquid earth. Perry grabbed his wife and ran outside. That decision saved their lives. What they saw next defied belief. The ground was moving in waves toward the ocean. Not shaking. Moving. Flowing downhill like thick molasses. The Tunnigan Heights bluff slid into Nick Arm in massive blocks. Each block was 200 feet wide and up to 1,000 feet long. They moved like giant rafts on an invisible river. Because that's essentially what was happening. The liquefied clay beneath them had zero strength. Zero friction. The blocks rotated as they slid. Some tilted backward. Some forward. Houses rode these blocks toward the water. Some homes stayed completely intact while moving 300 feet. Others split in half. Still others simply vanished into cracks that opened in the flowing ground. Perry Mead watched his neighbor's house tilt 30 degrees in one direction, then snap back the other way. The neighbor was still inside. Perry's own house was moving beneath his feet. He and his wife ran toward higher ground. The ground kept opening ahead of them. They jumped cracks that widened even as they leaped. They made it to stable ground by seconds. 75 homes were destroyed in Tinnigan. The slide area covered 130 acres. But here's the truly shocking part. Only 9 people died in the entire earthquake across all of Anchorage. 9. Despite 4 minutes of the strongest shaking North America had ever seen. Despite entire neighborhoods liquefying. Despite downtown collapsing. The low death toll was called a miracle. But it wasn't divine intervention. It was timing. Good Friday at 5:36 p.m. meant offices were empty. Schools were closed. Downtown was clearing out. If this earthquake had hit on a weekday at noon, the death toll could have reached thousands. The J.C. Penney store alone would have been packed with shoppers. The real shock came afterward. When engineers studied what happened, they found something disturbing. The bootlegger cove clay wasn't unique to Anchorage. The same type of soil exists beneath major cities worldwide. San Francisco, Seattle, parts of Los Angeles, Tokyo, Istanbul. Millions of buildings sit on ground that could liquefy in the next big quake. Anchorage rebuilt using new construction codes. Engineers now test soil before building. They look for liquefaction risk. They reinforce foundations. They avoid high-risk areas. The 1964 quake created modern seismic building standards. But here's what keeps geologists awake at night. Most cities built their downtowns before anyone understood liquefaction. San Francisco sits on bay fill that will absolutely liquefy in the next major earthquake. Seattle's waterfront is the same story. Los Angeles has entire neighborhoods on risky soil. The buildings are already there. Retrofitting is expensive. Many property owners skip it. Insurance companies know the risk. They've mapped every liquefaction zone. Your city probably has a map too. Most people never look at it. The Cascadia subduction zone off the Pacific Northwest coast will eventually produce a quake as big as Alaska 1964. Maybe bigger. When it does, soil liquefaction will devastate coastal cities. The ground will turn to liquid again. But this time it'll happen under millions of people, not 44,000. Robert Atwood rebuilt his newspaper and kept publishing until 1992. Perry Mead never built on a bluff again. The question isn't if liquefaction will strike another major city. The question is when. And whether we'll finally take the warnings seriously before the ground beneath us turns to water. If a story like this made you think twice about where you live, there are dozens more hidden disasters waiting to be told. The 1975 incident in China predicted earthquakes using snakes. How that actually worked is somehow even stranger than it sounds. Subscribe for a new dark truth every day.